and thank you for coming to the session. My name is Matt Jones. I'm here today to bring, I hope, some new perspectives on digital innovation, some hope for the future, some hope in technology, but hope most of all grounded in involving increasing numbers of people in the design of that future. Now, it's morning time, but I want us to start in the dark. So you have to bear with me here, and you can trust me because I am a doctor. Not that kind of doctor. So I want you to close your eyes very tight. Close your eyes tight, like this. Trust me. And when I say the next word, I want you to visualize what that word means to you. So you ready? Eyes closed. California. California. Please don't go to sleep. Okay, open your eyes. So, California. What an amazing place that is, right? Maybe you had images of beaches, Volkswagen, sun, youth, the future, high-tech, startups. It's where the future is being created. Now, if you've got an Apple iPhone and you flip it over onto the back, you will probably see those words, those magical words, designed by Apple in California. Because California is where the future is being made. But it's not just Apple. If you've got a Google phone, that's a Google charger. And you can see, if you've got fantastic eyesight, the words designed by Google in California. Apple thought it was such an important phrase, they patented it. They have a patent on designed by Apple in California. But if you're buying a Tesla, you're buying shoes, you're buying anything, those magical words are there. Designed in California. It's where our future is being made. If you look at the back of your iPhone, you probably also see the words assembled in China. Yeah? Certainly on my phone. So somewhere else, California, is designing our future. Then it's being made somewhere, and then it goes out to colonize everywhere in the world. And I think that's a problem, and I'd like you to think about that over the next 40 minutes with my colleagues. Let me give you some examples of the problems. This is an art exhibit in Apple in California, made by an ex-student at Swansea University, Will Thimbleby. And what the visitors are doing there, they're looking into a sea of iPads, and they're watching in real time as people are purchasing apps. There's an app for everything, isn't it? You can look down and you can get whatever you want. But let's flip that guy round and take a close look what happens to him. Another person appears. Anyone recognize that person? They're not a real person, they're from mythology. It's Narcissus. And Narcissus was drawn into a forest, and he was drawn to a dark pool of water. He went down to the pool and he looked into it, just like you and I look into our dark screens of our mobile phones. And he was entranced. He was trapped. He touched the surface of the pool, much as you might touch the surface of your mobile phone. And he didn't move. Meanwhile, above him were water nymphs. Anybody know what water nymphs are? Okay, you do. They are little angels, and they're flying above Narcissus' head. And they are saying, Narcissus, Narcissus, look up. We're real. They're not real, but we're real. Look at us. We love you. But he didn't move, and he died at that pool. The future being designed in California is perhaps dragging the life out of us. So put your hands up if you've got friends or family who do this sort of thing. Okay? Yeah, shame on them. All right, close your eyes again because this needs to be anonymous. Put your hand up if you've ever done this, looked at your mobile phone when your friends and loved ones and family are nearby. Yes, all of you. Those of you who didn't put your hands up, you're lying. So what we're going to do in this session is to think about a different perspective. There are problems because California is just one mindset. It isn't just a place, it's a mindset of design. And you will find Californian design in London, in Mumbai, in Delhi. It's one perspective on the future of technology. And what we're going to try and encourage you today is to think about broadening that perspective by working with what we're calling emergent users. I'm going to show you a very brief film to give you a richer sense of what those emergent user settings are like.
Emergent users are people who are just getting their hands for the first time on new technologies. And we're going to be taking two of our recent prototypes. So one of them is a speech-based system. Think about Alexa or Google Home. Then the other prototype is a small robot, a printer if you like, that can use materials at hand in that kind of environment. And we've adapted those and taken them into the streets of Dharavi, a slum area in Mumbai.
We've been working with emergent users to come up with designs for future technology that fit their needs in a way that is more appropriate.
ये मशीन अच्छा है, पब्लिक हेल्पफुल है. कोई अगर किसको कुछ क्वेश्चन या किधर जाना है इसके बारे में यहाँ पे उसको हेल्प मिल सकती है. It's good for people.
My role in collaboration with Professor McDonald's and FitLab team is recruit the emergent users for the experiments. I also think from a local perspective how experiments can be enhanced.
Over the last several years, they've given us fantastically new ways of looking at technology, which not only will better fit with these sorts of contexts, but perhaps provide new landscapes of digital opportunity for everyone.
So, as you can see there, the approach that we are taking is not to design the future in isolation, in a clean lab, but to go out where the real people are, into communities. That was done in the monsoon earlier this year, to work with people to get their perspective on technology and in a collaborative way try to think about new forms of digital interaction. Not just for those communities who are getting their hands on technology for the first time, but as you'll see, those communities are giving all of us new perspectives on how we live and work and play with technology wherever we live. We're going to have three case studies now from my colleagues, and we're going to start with some pioneering work that was done over a decade ago now. I'm going to invite my colleague Amit from IBM to take the mic and begin our journey to see how working for and with emergent users you can get fresh new forms of technology innovation. Amit.
Thanks, Matt. So if I can please request you, bear with me, could you take out your phones and put them on your hands and cover this phone with the other hand so that you can't see the screen, okay? I'm talking about the set of emergent users who are smart, socially active, knowledgeable, just like all of us in this room, but it's just that they cannot read or write. Okay? Now my question is, this phone that you have in your hand, it's covered. How would you interact with it? That's the question. Okay? And this is the question that we asked ourselves several years ago. And now I just want you to transport yourselves to a remote rural village, right? And see if you can understand what the needs of that population may be. Information needs, if you will, yes. And so imagine hyper-local information needs, right? What do I need? I need to know when is the medical mobile hospital coming to my village, yeah? Is the bus going to be delayed? Stuff like that. And here is a village entrepreneur. We'll imagine that he really understands this stuff well. And he goes all over the place, collects and gathers information that's of local importance. And what he does afterwards is that he uses a simple phone, yeah, it doesn't have to be smart, and he dials into something that I'm going to call a voice site. And he uploads all this information just by talking over the phone, right? So since he's talking, it's in the local language, dialect, and accent. So if anyone wants to access this information, all they have to do is call a number, and they will listen to all the things that are important to them, right? And with the hindsight of the World Wide Web, if you can imagine, one voice site, then of course you can imagine many. And then of course you'll think of linking, and you will think of all these things, right? I make a call, while talking, I press a hyperlink, right? Which means I just say some word, hot word, and that'll transport me to another voice site. And I should be able to, you will expect that we should be able to transfer calls, browse, search, and transact on such a spoken web, right? So this is what the vision was, this is what the idea was. So how would you create such a voice site? Of course, if you're creating a voice site and if these people can't read or write, then they have to create this by voice, right? So we created a system where people can just talk to the system, and in the process of talking, a voice site gets created for them. So we did one of our first pilots in Andhra Pradesh, and what we did was, as a simple experiment, we allowed everyone to just have sort of 30 seconds to record anything that they wanted to have recorded so that other people could listen to it, right? Think of this as classifieds on voice, okay?
నేను ఆటో మెకానిక్ మరియు బైక్ మెకానిక్ చేయబడును మాది జోరపాలెం
So this
9849307156
this guy is a mechanic and he's recording his information in Telugu, right? And he could be standing on the roadside and doing it. And what we learned anecdotally, interestingly, is that somebody else, when they had a breakdown, they just called up this voice site, they knew whom to call, and they got help. Right? So this is happening on the fly in real time. Similarly, there are people who are recording, he wanted to rent his vehicle, so he put up an ad for that. And interestingly, this particular village was also into fish farming. Okay? So what was happening is that if some guy has a problem and a lot of fish are dying, then they actually try to call up a number and get help. And what happens is that this guy comes with a bag of chemicals, he makes some readings, the readings have to be taken there because otherwise the sample becomes stale and you don't get the right readings. So he makes those readings right there, sitting next to the lake, and carries them back to the lab, and within about 72 hours or so, they get a response. And we wanted to reduce this response time, okay, in order to make this efficient. And so now what happens is that people can just record this, yeah, the readings over the phone, and somebody else would listen to this and give an advice back. So
మీరు సాల్ట్ వచ్చేసి 30 kg per acre ఉదయం 11 గంటల నుండి 12 గంటల
so they got an advice of what to put, what kind of chemicals to put in that pond, in that part of the pond, so that they would be fine. Yeah. So these are the things we did in the first. And interestingly, people put up matrimonial ads, yeah, election speeches, and even I think this is a voice greeting, right? Of parents recording their kids' voice for the grandparents, and this is all before Facebook. Or these people have not heard or seen Facebook, but they reinvented Facebook just by themselves. Right? This is what people did, and this was very, very powerful for us. And so what we went on to do is we did another pilot with just farmers, where farmers could exchange information. They could ask questions and get answers by talking, yeah, among themselves. And so we had radio programs and question answer sessions, and this is what it was. So for example, and this was done in Gujarat, so this language is Gujarati. The first one is Telugu.
Great, thank you very much. And not designed in California. So remember, this is over 10 years ago. And Amit and his team, by working with rural communities across India, got some amazing insights about how people want to express themselves and have a voice, which at the moment is predominantly English. Of course, today, many of us have seen this sort of device. So just raise your hands if you've either used one of these or got one of these in your homes. Amazon Alexa, Google Home. Okay, and you put them in your house and you ask questions, and sometimes you get answers, right? And sometimes you get strange things. We've been working, as you saw in that film earlier in the talk, with people in Dharavi in Mumbai and also in townships in Cape Town. And we've been trying to think differently about voice assistants for the future. So as you can see, first of all, we put the prototypes not in private, but in public settings. And here are some children here using one of our earlier prototypes. The other thing we learned was that, and this might be a surprise to some of us who are technologists, humans and computers are not the same. And so having a conversation with a computer often doesn't work, right? And so what we've been building is a system that can combine artificial intelligence with human-powered answers. And we're going to try a demo of this system now live, which means it's not going to work. We're going to ask my colleague to come up and be the user. Before he does anything, I'll just draw your attention to this little box with a blue button. That was one of the boxes that we placed all around Dharavi during monsoon this year. And what it does is you press a button and you ask a question. We're aiming that if there is a machine answer, then the machine will give the answer. If the machine cannot give the answer, then the question is sent into the cloud, and a community member on their mobile phone can answer that question. So Aniruddha is going to role play someone in Dharavi. I'm going to role play someone else in Dharavi who's a member of the crowd in the cloud. So off you go, Aniruddha. What is your question?
So the question is, मुंबई से दिल्ली तक की दूरी कितनी है?
प्रश्न के लिए धन्यवाद. आपका नंबर है 5422. 10 मिनट या अगली बार जब आप यात्रा करते हैं.
So what's happening here is that there is no machine answer, and so it's going up into the cloud, and I'm somewhere else in Dharavi. I'm going to try and answer this question if I've got it. So I'm on my mobile phone. I could be anyone with a mobile phone, and I think I've got the question. Bear with me. Something's happening. What was the number again? 5423. Okay.
So the question is, मुंबई से दिल्ली तक की दूरी कितनी है?
Okay, so now I'm going to answer it. You can see I've got a little button there to answer. So let me do my translation. The distance is about 3 hours flight. See, humans can think of better answers than computers. A computer would give you a very precise answer. Now what happens is I send that answer back into the cloud, and then later, Aniruddha comes along. The distance is about 3 hours flight. Okay, so as you can see there, the idea is to combine human intelligence, it's amazing, a demo worked, phew, with artificial intelligence. So round of applause to my role play there. And that leads me neatly on, we didn't plan this, to our second case study. And Aniruddha is going to take us from spoken language to textual language. Aniruddha.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a problem that probably many of you in this room have seen from time to time in your life. So, and this is an example of that problem. So once somebody had put up a beautiful mural in the Industrial Design Center where I teach, and the mural was sort of delicate. It was made of terracotta, so they didn't want people to touch it, so they put up a sign next to it, which looked something like this. And the problem here, how many people can see the problem? Can anybody see the problem? Okay, so the problem here that we're trying to deal with is that the English sign has been nicely and beautifully typeset, but the Hindi sign is handwritten. Okay, so this is the problem that, and we've kind of encountered this kind of problem from time to time in our lives at different at the different places. Okay, and we can see this in many places, including professionally designed Hindi film posters. Okay, so you'll find the English typography is beautifully designed, and the Hindi typography is just by the way. And sometimes we see really very long sentences written in Hindi in the Roman script. So those of you who can understand Hindi, can you make sense of what's written over there? Yeah, it gives your brain a little bit of twist to kind of decode and find out what that means. Okay, so why do we see, I mean, these posters are designed for Hindi-speaking audiences, and why do we see them in the Roman script? Okay, because the designer of the poster does not know how to type in Hindi. Okay, and this problem is there at much larger scale on the Wikipedia, for example, and we can see them in many other places. But so this is a graph which shows the number of native speakers along the x-axis in millions. So and the number of Wikipedia articles in the thousands on the y-axis. Okay, so this group of languages over here you'll see English, German, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, and Mandarin. So all languages more than 100 million native speakers, and all having more than 1 million Wikipedia articles. Okay, then this group of languages here are relatively smaller number of smaller number of native speakers, but still more than 1 million Wikipedia articles. My favorite language there is Wari-Wari, a language spoken in Philippines by about 5 million people, but already has more than 1 million Wikipedia articles. Now, if you compare that with a group of Indian languages that are sort of at the middle over there, so they are all 100,000 Wikipedia articles or more, and all of us know that most Indian languages have between 50 to 300 million native speakers, but they're all 100,000 or less articles in the Wikipedia. So we see this problem again and again, and a lot of it is to do with text input. In fact, if you cannot text input, you cannot do many, many things with computers. You cannot make presentations, write documents, create posters or design shop signs, send a message. You cannot do online shopping. You cannot book a train ticket. Even if you're booking a train ticket, you have to do a little bit of text entry. You cannot search on the internet unless you're using one of these devices. And you cannot save a contact. So, but why does this matter? Okay, so it matters because, and just bear with me for a minute. So this is another graph which shows the blue line at the top, or the gray line at the top, is the population of India in crores. So if you follow millions, add a 0. Okay, so that's about 1.3 billion people currently. The red line over there is the number of active SIMs in India. So we are about 110 crore, about 1.1 billion active SIM cards in India. The yellow line is the number of active internet users in India, which is about 40 crores or 400 million. And the blue line is number of smartphones sold in India. Okay? And then the purple line at the bottom is the number of landlines in India. Okay? So that's the contrast. And now, if you add education information on top of this, okay, so this is an approximate distribution of the education information. The green line at the bottom is the number of graduates in India. And then HSC diploma, matric, middle school, primary school, and then the literacy line. Okay? So if you see now how many people are literate but cannot use English. Okay, so there's a large body in the middle who are literate, who can read and write in their mother tongues, but cannot read English, cannot follow English. Between 20 to 40% of the population, depending on when you say, what do you mean by cannot read or cannot understand English? So, between 20 to 40% of our population is like that. So this is the work that we did for this population. So our design problem was, given that the typing in Indian languages is hard, how to make a keyboard that is usable by every literate Indian. Okay, and there are essentially 4 problems that we kind of dealt with while solving this. So one is that we have a large number of characters in Indian languages. So that's the number of characters that we typically need to type when you're typing in English, 26. And then that's the number of characters that you would typically need to type when you're typing in an Indian language. And how did we solve this problem? So we designed a keyboard that is beautiful and easy to design and understand, So for example, we have used different kinds of groupings and chunks, and we have used the structure of the Indian languages. So you can see very tiny lines over there. So those are the ones that make it easier for people to understand and group their characters. The second problem that people have is the sequence. So many of you can read Hindi here perhaps, so I will not explain, but those who cannot, so Indian languages they have consonants and then they have vowel modifiers very often. So the vowel modifiers could either come after, like in this case, they can come after the consonant, or they can come before the consonant, or they can be above or below. Okay, so, and then this is something that confuses a lot of people when they're inputting Indian languages. So what we did was we took out this problem of sequence. When you touch a consonant, then as soon as you touch the consonant, a circle comes around it with all the possible vowel modifiers that you could put. So it takes away the sequence. It converts something that you have to remember into something that you can recognize on the screen. The third problem is of conjuncts. Very often we have to combine characters to make a single character. And again, this is something that we are all familiar with. The problem is that people cannot figure out what are the constituent characters sometimes. So like, I don't know if any of you can figure out the ksha is made up of a k and a sh. Okay? But again, this keyboard takes away the problem of doing that. So you touch the first consonant and then you select the option to make it a half character. And that changes the whole keyboard and it gives you an option of selecting all the conjuncts that start with that particular consonant. And then you can go ahead and then also apply the vowel modifiers on top of that. So we designed this in India there are many languages. There are 22 official languages and then many more languages that are spoken. So this is in Hindi, and then we have Marathi and Bengali. And then we have Gujarati, Malayalam and Assamese. And we have Konkani, Punjabi and Tamil. And then Kannada, Telugu and Odia. These are the languages we are supporting as of now. It's a lab-based, what we call a zero-budget project, which means it has been built up by voluntary contributions from people in our lab and outside. And we are very proud to have more than 4 million downloads in the last 5 years that it has been available on the Play Store. And its usage has been growing. And very rapidly, there are more and more people who are using these keyboards. And then the fourth question, which I'll kind of quickly talk about, I'm not going to talk about this much, is of speed. And we're trying to kind of identify and help people improve their speeds and also comparing the speed of input with other keyboards. We have been conducting a lot of studies, which I'll not talk about right now, but we have been going and working with emergent users. So for example, this is an example of a study that we did in several government schools in India, where we are working with children to provide this. So the speeds have been very good and improving over a period of time. We are designing for a new group of users that have just found a new voice. And if you are interested, please join us in this work and join all these people who have been contributing to this product so far.
Great, thank you very much. Not designed in California. So remember back, those of you who joined us at the beginning, on the back of your phone, you'll see those words, designed in California. And what you're seeing, I hope, in this session is that there's a need to give new communities a voice and a way of communicating and expressing their needs through technology. And we're going to carry on that theme now with another colleague from IIT B in Mumbai, and it's Alka. And Alka's going to take us on a journey from text now to language. Alka.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you for being here. I'm going to talk about English language learning. So my project sort of wriggles and finds its space somewhere between what Anirudh has been talking about and what Matt has suggested earlier. The number of English language speakers in this country is not very high. The project is called Learn English Through Stories, and it came about not because I see an urgent need for every one of us in this country to speak English, but because they did. I was working in some villages at 10,000 feet above sea level, Khund, Khanag near Jalori Pass in Himachal Pradesh. And there are schools there that are now beginning to get computers and access to the internet. And teachers realizing that there's a lot of teaching tools that are available on the web, but that they cannot access for their students or themselves unless there's a certain facility with the English language. Until that world changes enormously, as Anirudh and his team are working toward, we are still going to need to give people access to the web through the use of this language, right? But one of the primary things that language does is expresses culture. What do you do with teaching tools of the English language that do not arise from the context in which they are being used? Does it allow people to participate less or more fully in it? How alien is access to any kind of learning when all the teaching tools come from elsewhere, which has been the case with the English language so far. Most of the research that's done is done outside. The socioeconomics that are represented, even in the teaching tools, are not ours. And so we took the problem back into context and tried to see it from the point of view of the learners themselves. I speak about process anymore, I just wanted to say that I'd like you to focus on three things as I speak about what we did in these areas. And they're all related to education in our country. The first is the paucity, often the complete lack of teachers in remote rural contexts. The second is context sensitivity, but on two axes. The first is on relevance. What is it that is taught? And does it speak to the ground? And the second context sensitivity is who is the participant here and what is the sense of ownership that that participant has to the material that is being used for teaching anything at all. And those are largely the ways in which we've approached this problem, where, as you will have seen in the film also, we took materials in the first instance. In our first iteration, we took books that had been done by Pratham, we took animated short stories that had been done by Bookbox, with same language subtitling, karaoke style highlighted captions and so on. And we tested basic proficiency levels of these children in various schools in Himachal Pradesh, but also in Maharashtra, and then later in the tri-state area of Karnataka, Andhra and Tamil Nadu, where Agastya International Foundation works and is an active partner with us. After we had tested them and seen how well or how badly they responded to these things, we also left them alone to work with these exercises, spending time on an everyday basis over several months to do experiments with and without control groups, to figure out whether this kind of listening and recording of their own voices reading stories had any kind of significant impact on learning. And this is true of all these pedagogies, that it did. There's no doubt about it, even though we were there for short periods of time and we can't walk away from the charm of novelty. You can see that when children are left alone with these things, they spend sufficient time and it impacts how much they learn in reading, comprehension, prosody, and so on. That we were able to see very easily. But as with all situations in India, when we go into remote rural contexts, we often speak of them as resource constrained. You've seen that phrase bandied about even amongst us, and I use it very often too. We fail to recognize which resource is constrained. It's only material resources that are constrained in these areas. Everyone's talking here about imagination. Everyone's talking here about ability of children to deal with new sort of things that are offered to them. But what we are trying to do, all of us in this, is to see how to translate that into products and processes that they themselves and others can then use for teaching and learning. Okay? So we moved from taking things into them to trying co-creation. Now, content generation is a term that's bandied about a lot also. And we tried to do that by insisting on specific content from these areas. Right now, we are focused on English language learning, but the process that we're coming up with is really subject agnostic. I've already had talks with people in NCBS about creating science books like this, for instance. And I'd like to show you a few of the things that we've done so far. I'm not going to show you all the books, but there's a whole bunch of books that are now available that look like this. This is what comes out of children working with designers to create products that, I mean, when we write books, we have a publishing house, we have jacket designers and book designers and people who do page layouts and so on. But when we work with children in these areas, and there are lots of people who create books with them, we don't think of what it means to up the standard or the quality of the work that they produce in order for them to sensitize their own minds and eyes. Yes, to what is possible with their work, right? And these are books that have come out of things that they have made that we have then finessed. They write first in their native languages, and we translate those into English. We're also using processes where we translate it in a graded fashion, so that the early pages of the book are easy language, then you move to medium and hard language, so that it becomes a tool for learning language as well. What we're doing with these books also is that we are converting them into animated shorts, so that the very things that we've talked about with BookBox are now available using their stories, right? These are books that children have made. And animators work to convert those illustrations into animated shorts with highlighted captions that go back to the same audience that created this work. The sense of both participation and ownership is through the roof, basically. There are two things that this addresses. One is the kind of quality that you can achieve with the work that you've done. But the other is also that when we're talking about English language, in a lot of these contexts, it is not a language that's heard at all. And language cannot be learned without hearing its sounds. So we also have a mobile app that we're working on, in which all these books that you see displayed over here are being converted into sort of where you have illustration recognition connected to voice files that reads the pages of these books out to them as children work with the books. It's terribly important to remember that we are trying to bridge the technology and analog worlds over here. Because children create these books, it is essential that the books never disappear in terms of accessing even sound and language. With the animated shots, the books disappear. They go into the virtual world. But with the mobile app, this works in recognizing the pages of the book, right? So they make their own books and they take them home. So in their native language, these books become sort of the first books they have in their personal libraries. And then we convert them to And just to clarify again, this is how they use the mobile application. So the book is integral to the process of using it and learning language through it. Again, 3 things: addressing the lack of or paucity of teachers in rural areas, and context sensitivity both in terms of relevance and in terms of participation and ownership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Remember, flip your phone over, designed in California. What Alka's just shown us, that by working with new communities, you get a very different sense about creativity, digital content, and interaction. We are material beings, physical people, and our mobile phones is just not a very rich form of interaction. Now, some of you might be sitting there and thinking, this is all very well, but how on earth are you going to, with 1 billion people plus in India, 1 billion in China, all the other users we have, all the devices and services you're all going to be talking about the rest of the day, how are we going to power these sustainably? I'm going to invite now, finally, for our case study, my colleague from Swansea, Dave, to come to the stage and perhaps give us at least a beginning of a solution. Dave.
Hi. Okay, thanks very much, Matt. Now then, just get the technology right. We're a bit like Narcissus, right, when we're looking at our energy situation. We're always looking down. If we go backwards through time and even now, like looking at our mobile phones, we're looking at coal, we're looking at gas, we're looking at oil, all of our energy supplies. This is a kind of conventional worldview which perpetuates to date and gives us huge problems globally and locally here with sort of things to do with air quality and so on. And our view, which we share with our colleagues, is it's kind of time to stop burning stuff to make energy, right? We can do it in another way. And actually, there's lots of talk of sort of nuclear power and fusion power, but we have available to us a fusion reactor. It just happens to be parked 93 million miles away, right? So there it is, and every day the Earth's surface receives more energy than we will use in the next quarter of a century. So we don't need to plaster the world with solar devices, but what we do need to do is bring solar technology to people and allow them to make it themselves, to actually manufacture solar cells locally, using resources they have available to them, and that's what our project aims to do. And also to prove that solar power, particularly for buildings of the future, is something really, really promising. Now, this is not new thinking, right? This guy, Thomas Edison, the alternate to Tesla, back in the day was enthused about electricity as a power source, based his entire life on sort of DC technology, which is the future. And that phrase he said there about using the sun before all the oil and coal ran out is going to be 100 years old soon, and still we haven't actually moved forward in dealing with it. Now, obviously, you might not think that the United Kingdom is the place to do solar energy research, but our contention is if we can prove that solar technology can work in sunny Britain, even post-Brexit, the situation for us globally in terms of the way that technology can be used is really very exciting. So we're looking at new technologies which work in low light conditions and in all light conditions, and in particular to look at how we can print solar cells at low cost. So there's a sort of a noise here of our factory unit. We use screen printing technologies to make solar cells. Just in the same way as Nike do to make t-shirts, we use a screen printer. So the idea is that we're able to use a technology that you can make t-shirts to make solar cells. And if you imagine you could do that anywhere then in the world, we could make a factory in a box, move it to anywhere in the world, and the local people could make and print solar devices. And they work, and I'll pass one around. This is a little bit like Tesla's roof tile, conspicuous in the absence of any kind of wires on the back of it, right? So, you know, but it does look like this, and obviously if you connect the wires, you get a device, and they work. So the next thing for us to do was to design a school building, which we did on our own university campus. We're going to repeat this now in Pune. This is a very new construction technology. Lots of digger action there. There's no concrete in this, right? So steel screw piles. You can tell I work with Tata Steel. Steel frame. A new panelized steel system which goes up by hand. Obviously in the UK we've got loads of scaffolding because it's obsessed by health and safety. The solar cladding, the solar roof, you'll see going on in a minute. There it goes. So one day you put the solar panels on really quick. And the building itself was completed by people like me. I was involved. I'm a trained construction professional, I'll have you know. I did the sealing of the joints, and we completed the building in 14 weeks. So it's very, very quick construction. And it worked really well, and we've got 1 year's worth of data out of it now. And we've transposed that data into what this would mean in terms of energy in an Indian context. The technologies we've got on there, we've got the PV roof, we've also got solar thermal collectors for making the hot water. And for India, again, what we're looking at is a version with cooling, adapted from work we're doing with Nissan on air source heat pumps, which are very, very efficient at providing hot and cold air. If we put this building in Pune, which we will do, and we'll check it, this is the kind of statistics you'd get from the energy that you've produced. Now, obviously, I'm coming with my conscious biases, so I need to drive everywhere in a car. An electric car would travel 132,000 miles based on the power that comes from that building. I've chosen a roast turkey, again, to continue the American aping theme. The roast turkey is the most energy inefficient form of food globally, which is why Americans like it. And like Donald Trump, it's somewhat tasteless. And ultimately, I've used that number there to realize the idea that you can cook with solar power, right? 3,902 turkeys in 1 year, 4 million cups of tea, or a carbon saving of 32 tons. So we really think that this technology has global appeal, and we're working with colleagues across India to look at how we can deploy similar classrooms and also retrofit existing buildings with the technology, including storage, so that we can transform the idea that energy has to be generated in a big chuffing power station with a big smoky chimney centrally and then distributed to something which is distributed power generation, which is exactly the same as all of the mobile communication that we have now in the world. So a very exciting future, I think, for energy. We're also thinking about other ways of powering these devices. So we can use the sun, but there are also other means by which we can convert mechanical energy into electrical energy, because the power required for small devices is actually quite low. And so we're looking at some work on printing and coating power generating devices. And I'll now hand back to Matt.
Great, thank you very much, Dave. We've come to the end of our session, and I guess I just want to reinforce that message for those of you who weren't here at the start. I said that, there is one dominant mindset about designing the future. It's called the Californian mindset. And guess what? We're probably all Californian. So let's not throw any stones. We come from that perspective. What I hope you've seen today, all of us, the team you've seen, have been working together, Swansea and Mumbai, for, in some cases, over a decade, getting rich new perspectives by working with people who are getting their hands on technology for the first time, be that for power generation, or for language learning, or for text input, or for having a voice through speech. So I want to end by saying, if you are not at the moment in business or working with these new perspectives, then let me encourage you to do so. There are at least two good reasons for that. One is, it's the right thing to do. as Alka was saying, everybody needs to have a voice. I was struck by what Aniruddha was showing, is the Wikipedia pages in many of the Indian languages, so small. That needs to change, obviously. We need to give people a voice. But secondly, it's good business. Not only because people in India or in Southern Africa where we work will have digital and technology needs, but by working with those people, you can disrupt and get very new perspectives that will perhaps move Narcissus, all of us, away from that dark pool and back into life again. So that one day, instead of flipping over our phone and seeing designed in California, we realize there are other places around the world which we can all benefit from. Now we've come to the end and you've had to listen to many things. What I'd like you to do for the last minute is just to turn to somebody you haven't met. Remember, this is a conference, a festival. Just say who you are very quickly. And then if you have one reflection or a question about everything you've heard, share it in your pair. And then I'll hand over to Amit, who will, if there are any issues and questions, we'll raise them. And then the session will end. So, make some noise. If you don't want to talk about that, talk about something else. Introduce yourselves, give yourselves business cards. And then one thing that you were puzzled about, or you had a question about, or you thought about when you were listening to those four very different presentations. So make some noise, please.